So who told you nothing is happening? Buddhists told you nothing is happening?
That's my understanding of Vedanta, that
No.
everything's the play of, say, consciousness.
Yeah, but it is a play. So when you watch the play, of course there is a play. Who said there is nothing on the stage?
So there is something happening.
Of course. There is something happening. And that is life. What we call that happening is life. That which is happening, we call it life.
So what is the meaning of Maya?
Maya then, what you see on the stage, what you see on the stage, what happens after the show is over?
Everybody goes back to their normal...
So, there is nothing on the stage. If you see a movie, you see the movie, you respond to it. If there is a tragic scene, tears may come. If there is a joke, you laugh. So you participate in the movie. But is the movie real? Isn't the movie an illusion? An illusion which appears on the screen. You see? So the idea is that life as we see it is a movie which appears on the screen of consciousness. The screen is always there. Consciousness is always there. Sometimes when this movie is happening, you watch it. When you are in deep sleep, there is no movie. There is no life when you are in deep sleep. So that which you saw during the waking state, it disappears in your deep sleep. Therefore it is not always there. That is, you will call it an illusion.
Is consciousness something apart from its content?
Consciousness is the screen. The movie is something which appears on it. So consciousness is always there. Consciousness is the only truth. If the definition of truth is, it is there all the time. It never is not. That is the truth, and that is consciousness. That is reality. So the only reality is consciousness, which is always there. Even in deep sleep.
So when you're saying that that's the only reality, I mean, she is here, but she's not what I think she is. What's that?
No. She is not there when you are in deep sleep.
But she is, surely.
No.
You mean when I fall to sleep, the whole world ceases to exist?
No, yeah, the whole world ceases to exist.
To me, but not objectively.
Wait a minute. What you are saying is, you may be asleep, the whole world is not. That is what you are saying. How do you know?
When I wake
That
up,
is your perception. They must be awake. I am in deep sleep. But you assume that the others are awake. Supposing, Swamiji, the consciousness of God makes it happen that during a particular 2 hours, everybody is asleep. Who is to say whether the world exists or not? If God makes it so happen that any particular 2 hours, everybody is asleep, who is to say that there is world outside which is seen by someone else? There is no one else.
So are you saying it would cease to exist? Is there a difference between it would cease to exist or it would cease to exist for all those who are asleep?
No, it would cease to exist for one reason, which not only the Hindu mystic has been saying, but the physicist says now. An object exists only if it is observed. The physicist says that.
They might be wrong too, of course.
So, everybody could be wrong. Then what are we talking about, Swami? What on earth are we talking about? If what anybody says could be wrong, and it could, I agree, then what are we talking about? Therefore, one of my basic concepts is anything anybody has said so far, anything any sage has said, anything any scripture of any religion has said is a concept. A concept is something which is liable to interpretation and will therefore be acceptable to some, not acceptable to others. That is my definition of a concept. Based on that definition, what I am saying is, what any sage has said at any time, what any scripture of any religion has said at any time, is a concept. Isn't it?
Yes, I would agree.
Any scriptures of any religion, why do we have wars? Because the scriptures of one religion are not acceptable to another. The principles of one religion are not acceptable to another. So, is there any truth at all, which, according to this definition, is not liable to interpretation and therefore cannot be denied by anyone? Is there any truth at all? The truth being something which cannot be interpreted and therefore will not be unacceptable to anyone. What do you think? What does the Buddhist say? Is there any truth at all according to this definition?
Well, the Buddha has his concepts too, but for myself, I don't know. I don't think I could answer that. I could only say, I suppose, when one actually knows, then there's nothing to argue about.
Then, the truth, according to this definition, is the impersonal awareness of being. I am. I exist. The impersonal awareness of being. I would be there whatever my name is. The impersonal awareness of being, which no one can deny, is the only truth. And the moment I talk about it, it becomes a concept. The impersonal awareness of being is the only truth. You see. The moment we think about it, it becomes a concept. The moment we talk about it, it becomes a concept.
And in deep sleep, is it also there?
Yes,
Then you can't
it is also there. I'll tell you why. When you wake up, do you not say, I slept well or I didn't sleep well? So if there was no awareness at all, who is to say she slept well or she didn't sleep well? So there was some kind of awareness. There was some kind of awareness. And the fact that it is not personal means it's an impersonal awareness. But during the waking state, the person is there. So, my basic concept is the reality is the impersonal awareness of existence, which is covered by the screen of the individual personality.
And so this impersonal awareness, it's the same thing, that it's still there, like when you said everybody goes to sleep, so there's nothing there. This is what...
That's right. Impersonal awareness is there because that is the only thing. I mean, to that extent, that also is a concept. To accept that there is a reality, a source from which everything has come, that is the basic concept. That there has to be a source, one without the second. from which has emerged this manifestation. And at the end of the emerge, it goes back into the source. Even that is a concept. We talk about it. So if there is a source, which is there all the time, that is the consciousness. The impersonal awareness, consciousness at rest, before the manifestation has come about, is consciousness at rest, which is not aware of itself. Call it potential energy. But once the potential energy has activated itself into this manifestation, consciousness in movement is the impersonal awareness.
Why does that happen? And if it happened once, one should become enlightened, why couldn't it happen again?
One should become enlightened. If you can explain that to me, then we can talk further. My concept about enlightenment, Swamiji, is this. The happening of enlightenment is an event in the functioning of manifestation of life as we know it. No one can become enlightened. No one can become enlightened. Because who is this one? We are talking about being enlightened or not being enlightened. Who is the one? What do you say? Who is this one who wants to be enlightened?
Yeah, well, from a Buddhist point of view, I'd say it's just this bundle of consciousness and concepts and ideas and feelings and experiences.
Yes, but basically, my concept about the one who wants enlightenment is one object, one species of object, which together with the thousands of other species of objects constitute the totality of manifestation. What is the manifestation which has emerged from the source? It is a collection of objects, isn't it? From the planet to the individual body, it is an object. So basically what I am saying, Swamiji, is that every human being is fundamentally only an object, one species of object, which together with other thousands of species of objects on land, air and water constitute the totality of objects, which is the manifestation. So, how can an object be enlightened?
Okay, I've got to rephrase my question then. Why is the guru and disciple relationship important? Why are you teaching? Why have these people come here? I mean, there must be some will, there must be some reason. It must be to bring about some change or restructuring.
Yes, certainly. So, that restructuring of the perspective and attitude, the restructuring of the perspective and the attitude in that object is self-realization or enlightenment brought about by the source who is bringing about the functioning of the manifestation. What is life? The functioning of the manifestation. And in the functioning of manifestation, which is life as we know it, enlightenment is one event. So what does enlightenment mean? What does it mean to you, son, if I may ask?
Speaking again from the Buddhist perspective.
Yes, of course.
The Buddhist would say, or the Buddha would say, that the realization that there is no self. Anatta.
There is no self, meaning the individual.
That which we identify with is not.
That is the individual, isn't it?
Yes.
Me. Me. So, the total acceptance, the total unconditional acceptance without the slightest doubt that the me as an individual entity with a sense of personal doership does not really exist. In other words, I don't live my life. Life is being lived through this object. That is my definition of enlightenment, which seems to agree with yours.
Except maybe one thing, if I may.
Sure. Sure.
Here the Buddha would say that something can be done to hasten or bring about that restructuring. My understanding is of your teaching or Vedanta is that it's the source that will do that, and nothing that you can do or the individual can do can hasten or change that.
Yes. Why? Because basically, fundamentally, the one who you say should be able to do something about it.
Doesn't exist.
It's merely an object. It's merely an object. One species of object, which together with thousands of other species constitute the totality of manifestation, which is a collection of objects.
But one must have painted oneself into a corner thereby. You are teaching. You do, Vedantic teachers do talk about the importance of the guru-teacher relationship.
Certainly, yes.
So how does that fit in with that?
So, as part of life. As part of life. So the basic question really, according to me, is if they are all objects through which, in the words of the Buddha, events happen, deeds are done, but there is no individual doer thereof. I wasn't sure of the source. Someone offered to find it for me, a Buddhist scholar. And she sent to me, it was here, it's disappeared. Some other Buddhist scholar must have borrowed it and forgot to return it. But from memory, which I don't myself trust, the name as I recollect is Lankavatara Stotra. Is there something like that?
Yeah, Lankavitara Sutra.
That's it. So if you refer to it, maybe you'll find it in that. Events happen, deeds are done, there is no individual doer thereof. If there is no individual doer thereof, who is the doer? The source, the reality, consciousness, God, noumenon, whatever you call it. But once you call something, give a label, the limitless becomes limited. But nonetheless, because we have to talk, conceptually we have to limit the limitless. Otherwise we can just be in the beingness. No.
So is that what you're saying, one spiritual practice is metaphorically to put one's feet up, light up a cigarette and just wait or just be? Or...
If you can.
And if you can't?
If you can't, you can't. But what you are saying is, I can. It's up to me. It's up to me to do what I want. It's up to me to do spiritual practices and attain, achieve enlightenment.
I see that as a problem, that's true. I can't see any way around it. I mean, it seems to me that the alternative is to just, like I said, light up a cigarette and go on with life, you know?
Go on with life. What I'm saying is, you, Swamiji, do not get on with life. Life gets on. You do not get on with life. Life gets on with you and the thousands of billions of other human objects. You see? That is why I keep saying, I don't live my life. My life is being lived. By whom? By the source.
How is the deepest possible understanding that there is no individual doer of any actions achieved?
Achieved by whom?
Achieved?
By an object. Can an object achieve anything, ma?
Why do we limit to just that then?
So, my basic fundamental question, can an object achieve anything? Can an object do anything. It can't. That's why the Buddha said, there is no individual doer. Events happen, deeds are done. There is no individual doer thereof. Very specific. So, my interpretation of that is that every human being is an object, is a uniquely programmed object, a uniquely programmed computer, an object through which the source brings about the deeds. Therefore, there is no individual doer. I repeat, according to my basic concept, every human being is a uniquely programmed instrument, object or computer through which the source or God or consciousness, whatever you call, brings about the deeds which the individual ego thinks is his action, his deed. And the source uses every human computer exactly as a human being uses its own computer. How does a human being use his computer? He puts in an input. And the programmed computer has no choice but to bring out an output strictly according to the programming. The computer has no choice. On the contrary, the other way you could say, the programmed computer has the right to bring out a particular output. So the ego can say, I can do what I like, of course, according to the programming. So the ego, according to my definition, is identification with a name and form, with a sense of personal doership. So it is not identification which is important. It is a sense of personal doership. If the Buddha, when he was alive, were called by name, he would respond, wouldn't he? Whatever name he is called, Master, I don't know what was the Buddha called?
Bhagavan.
Bhagavan.
Not the other one.
Didn't Buddha say there is no Bhagavan? So now, if Buddha were called by name, that is Bhagavan, he responded, didn't he? He responded, yes, what can I do for you, my son? Isn't it? So the fact that the Buddha responded to his name being called obviously means there was identification with a particular body-mind organism and a name. That is why I say, even after self-realization, the identification with the name and form must continue, so that that body-mind organism can live for the rest of its allotted span of life. You see? In other words, what I am saying is, it is possible for the ego to live without a sense of personal doership. And what is more, live life much more simply. So what is destroyed by the self-realization is a sense of personal doership, that's all. Otherwise, nothing changes. Life continues to be what it was, according to God's will, or the will of the source, and the personal destiny of that body-mind organism.
Could I
yes,
elaborate?
of course. Anytime.
I'd like to suggest the worst possible scenario just to make my point. I was reading the transcripts of the trial of Rudolf Hoss, who was the commandant of Auschwitz.
Yes.
And in his trial he said in 1944 he was told to wind up the camp.
Yes.
And he says, because there was no more gas, I ordered that the children be thrown into the furnace without being killed first.
Yes.
And he says their screams could be heard all over the camp.
Yes.
So I'm just suggesting this is the worst possible scenario.
Yes.
How can that be the will of God? How can that be the will of the source? And you said to me before, I don't live my life. Life lives through me. Why would life live through anybody like that?
No, that's not your question. Your question is really, basically, why does a merciful God bring about an event where babies are thrown alive into furnaces?
Yeah.
Is that right? Let's take the extreme scenario.
Yeah, that's an extreme scenario.
All right, agree?
Yeah.
It's an extreme scenario. Why would a merciful God throw live babies allowed? Why would a merciful God allow live babies to be thrown into the furnace? That's the question, isn't it? Now, did God tell you that He is a merciful God?
No, all the pundits did that.
God never told you that He is merciful. So, you create a concept of God and then you give Him attributes. All-knowing, all-powerful, merciful. And then you ask God, you merciful God, why are you doing this terrible thing? Handicapped children, disease, war, Hitler, Stalin. How can you do it? You see, and God is silent.
I can't think of an answer to that. I think it's a very good answer. So one other thing would be, if I do accept, on the other hand, that it is the will of some source,
Yes.
then what would motivate me to try to say,
that is not the
rectify
answer.
that?
Again, if you continue to use we, I shall continue to ask, who is this we? And the we are objects. Basically, son, who is this we? Who is this me? An object which cannot get away from that basic concept. We, who are the we? The objects which think they are we because God has created the ego with divine hypnosis. God has created the ego by divine hypnosis, which makes the object think he or she is an individual doer.
Why?
Because without the egos, interhuman relationships cannot happen.
Why do they need to happen?
Without interhuman relationships, life as we know it cannot happen. The functioning of manifestation cannot happen. Having created the manifestation, the source has to have that manifestation function.
But for what purpose?
Now, that's a good question. For what purpose? You see, who wants to know the purpose? A created object wants to know the purpose or the will of the created subject.
Legitimate quest, surely?
An object. So, Alexander from Vienna, he's out there, he couldn't find a place inside. He came some time ago with his wife, Hela. Alexander had strong resistance, he probably still has. So he's always full of questions. Hela sat in the corner, hardly any question. Then suddenly, he said, on the last day, Hela said, Ramesh, this is my last day. I've only one question. I have the feeling that what you are really saying is, if I create a painting, and in that painting I create a figure, that figure in the painting which I have created can never know why I did the painting. Hela, you couldn't have put it better. She was delighted. I said, that's all what I'm saying comes to. A created object can never possibly know the will of the creator subject. And in this case, the creator subject is pure subjectivity. So how can a created object ever know why the subjectivity did whatever it has done? That the second principle is, why did God create this? The point that I'm making is, Swamiji, life as we know it, the functioning of manifestation is based on interconnected opposites. Adam and Eve, good and evil, beauty and ugliness, any number of these interconnected opposites. And my point is, there never could have been a single moment of life or the functioning of manifestation when only one existed and not the counterpart. Cannot. That is the basis. Otherwise it will be a lame manifestation with one leg. So, Swamiji, after yesterday's talk, any comments?
Yeah,
Oh, you have written them down.
Yeah, well, yes.
Good, much better.
I'm somewhat cognitive time.
I was interested in your making a distinction between identification,
Yes.
which you felt was
Yes.
something that didn't have to be dealt with,
Yes.
and doership, what you call
That is
doership.
correct, yes.
Could you further elaborate on the differences between them? I
Sure.
take identification to be a feeling that certain given experiences or objects am I.
Yes. Yes, sure. There is a book, you can take a copy before you leave, called
Take what I.
the infamous ego. Murti? Yanai huh? Yes. So the main distinction I make is this. Another distinction I make, I would like, which goes with it. The mind, I repeat again, it is a concept. It is a concept of mind. That the mind I divide into the working mind and the thinking mind. The thinking mind is the ego. The working mind is not concerned with what happens in future, about the job that is being done. The mind that aspect of the mind which deals with a job in hand, whatever it is, may be planning, may be actually done. That is what I call the working mind, which continues after the sense of doership is gone. So, in the case of a sage, identification with a name and form continues with the working mind. It is the thinking mind, the ego, which is concerned not so much with the efficiency of the work taken in hand, but almost totally with the consequences for itself. And the working mind is concerned only with doing a good job. The thinking mind says, I don't care if the job is not good, if it brings me the results that I want. The thinking mind is concerned with the consequences, results in future. The working mind is not concerned with the future. both the thinking mind and the working mind dip into the memory. The thinking mind dips into the memory and projects its wants and desires in future. And its fears. The working mind dips into the past only for the experience. Let me give you an example. The surgeon has got his body before, a heart surgeon. He has to make an incision. So the working mind dips into the past. From my past experience, which is the best place to put the incision, make the incision. That is the working mind dipping into the past memories, experience. But there it is, that's it. So the working mind dips into the past memories, but it ends in the present moment of doing the job. The thinking mind goes into the past, but then projects its fears and hopes and ambitions and consequences in future. The working mind is not concerned with the future. And the thinking mind is the ego. You see? So that is essential part of the difference between that sense of doership and the mere identification with the body-mind organism. Ramana Maharshi lived 50 years after his self-realization. So for 50 years, the body-mind organism lived in society, had to participate in life, limited, yes, but still participated in life. Ramana Maharshi had to suffer pain. Ramana Maharshi also felt the responsibility. He said once, I left my mother and my brother as part of the samsara which he has left. And now, he said, referring to his ashram, I left a small son, look what I've got now.
So could we say that in, say, his case, or the enlightened person's case, he would still, could we say that the thinking mind still functions, but there is no concern, or one doesn't take it seriously any longer? That is, that those desires and everything are there, but one doesn't react to them, or do they cease completely?
No. Let's take with this desires. What happens to a sage? Desires arise. Anger arises. Fear arises. Compassion arises. And all these which arise are the outputs because of an input. So, yesterday we didn't go too much into this. What is the input which the source uses to put in any human computer, uniquely programmed human computer, to get a specific output from a specific computer, human computer? That's what's been happening. Out of the billions of human computers, what the source of God does is to bring out a unique action, a unique output through every body-mind organism. In other words, an action which happens at any moment could not have happened through any other body-mind organism. It had to have a particularly, uniquely programmed computer for that output to happen. Now, that body-mind organism could be that of an ordinary man or that of a sage. If they are similarly programmed, a similar output must arise. Let us say there is a sage, and there have been plenty of sages with short fuses, where anger would arise quickly. Plenty of sages, especially in Hindu mythology. There are plenty of people, plenty of sages, and there's some sages, anger would arise, and along with it a curse. Now, whether you would call such a sage or not is a technical matter, another matter. But he was a sage. So, whether it is a sage or an ordinary person, anger can arise, fear can arise, compassion can arise. So, if the same reaction can happen because of the same input, then where is the difference? Where is the difference between an ordinary man and a sage? If both see the same thing, and anger arises in both, or fear arises in both, where is the difference? Isn't it? Now, according to the Buddhist understanding, what would be the answer from
I can think of one sutra where somebody asked it.
unless you say that is not possible.
No.
What I'm saying is, the sage cannot be afraid, the sage cannot be angry. Then we are on different bases altogether.
That would be the Buddhist position, but there is
But more practical would be what I say.
Well, I know what the Buddha said. In one place somebody asked the Buddha, he says, an ordinary person feels pain and an enlightened person feels pain, so what is the difference between them? And he says, when the ordinary person feels pain, he then laments and beats his breasts and falls into despair. He is like a man who, on being shot with one arrow, is then shot with a second arrow. But the enlightened person, on feeling pain, does not lament and cry and beat his breasts. He is like a man on being shot with one arrow, is not shot with the second arrow. So that would indicate the idea that the enlightened person... A Buddhist would say there's no reaction. He sees it as an illusion or as not real, and how could fear arise?
But Swami, Christ on the cross,
Yeah.
he shouted out in pain, didn't he?
I didn't think he was enlightened.
You don't consider, but the Pope recently said, if you remember, the final salvation can only happen through Jesus Christ. And yet, here you are saying that Jesus Christ may not have been enlightened. Anyway, so, now my explanation for this is this. Pain can arise, and pain can make the body-mind organism shout out in pain.
Okay, but I see a difference between that and, say, anger, or say somebody attacks me with a knife.
Yes.
I feel that I am threatened. So if there were no I, where could fear arise from?
You see, fear arises, according to my concept, from the program computer. Conditioning. And genes, both. Conditioning.
So there'd be a biological function.
It is a biological, mechanical function. The arising of pain, arising of anger, arising of fear is automatic, mechanical. The real point is what happens after that.
Okay.
You see?
So fear arises.
That is the difference between the ordinary man and the sage. Fear arises. At the moment, the arising of fear is a mechanical, as you say, biological happening. What happens after that? That is where the difference comes in. The ordinary man says, I am afraid. What has happened? Fear has arisen. The ordinary man says, I am afraid. I don't want to be afraid. I want to be strong and brave like my friend. I don't know what to do. This is what happens every time. Something happens and I tremble with fear. That is the involvement in horizontal time. The arising of the fear is in the moment. The involvement of the ordinary man, I am afraid, that is where the sense of doership comes in, and takes him into a horizontal involvement, so that he is unaware of the next moment, or the next 10 moments, or next 20 moments, because he is involved in horizontal time. What happens to the sage? He witnesses the fear arising, And
in other words, there's some standing back from it. He sees it as an event.
no, then the witnessing of the anger, you can say, is by the ego, but in the case of a self, there is no sense of personal doership. So, the arising of the fear is witnessed, but there is no sense of personal doership in the ego to take delivery of that fear and say, I am afraid, because there is no me as the doer. You see? So, my concept is the sage witnesses the fear. Not only does the sage witness the arising of the fear, but also the resultant action. The arising of that fear and the resultant action is one in the moment. He may run away from the body-mind organism may run away. So what the sage sees is the arising of the fear leading to that body-mind organism running away, whereas his friend, sage or not, accepts the fear and does something about it or gets involved. You see? So, the fear arises, the sage runs away. Now the sage running away is really, it is not the sage running away, but the arising of the fear and the reaction of the body-mind organism with this self-protective instinct, the body runs away.
Once again, the biological.
It is still one mechanical reaction. In fact, there is a story about Adi Shankara, the original one who got all the Advaita together. His basis was that life or the manifestation is an illusion. So, the king sent for him, listened to his talk, and then the next morning what he did was, he had his elephant chariot. He knew Adi Shankara's routine. So he knew that Shankara would at a particular moment be at a particular and would be crossing a fairly broad road. So what this king did was to go and wait for some distance with his elephant chariot. And as Shankaracharya was crossing the road, he asked the chariot driver to charge at Shankaracharya. You see? And Shankaracharya, or his body, ran across the road and took shelter. You see? So, he sent for him and then said, look, this morning such and such a thing happened. So Shankaracharya said, so what's your problem? So you ran away. So he said, in that illusion which is life, in that illusion you charged at me as part of the illusion. And my running away and taking shelter was also part of the same illusion. That also is part of the same illusion. So what happened? The arising of the fear and the instinct to protect itself, the body-mind organism ran and took shelter. You see? Therefore, it is, you can't say Shankaracharya ran. Therefore, if Ramana Maharshi was, during the night, could be heard moaning from his cancer, or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa really shouting, Mother, why are you making me suffer like this? Or Jesus Christ, Father, why hast thou forsaken me? It is the pain taking further process of shouting. So, the shouting may happen, running away may happen, but it is seen as part of a happening through a body-mind organism which is his. In other words, if the arising of fear and running away happened in some other body-mind organism, the sage would witness it without any reaction to the natural reaction. So, the arising of the fear and the running away happens not through some other body-mind organism, but in this body-mind. There's the difference. You see? So, my point is, it is the sense of personal doership in an ordinary man which gets him involved. In other words, the ordinary man reacts, or the ordinary man's ego reacts to the natural reaction, a biological reaction or mechanical reaction. You see? Whereas in the case of a sage, since there is no ego with a sense of doership, there is no reaction to the biological reaction. That is the difference.
That is very clear. Now, may I ask this?
Please.
I can understand how the biological, that is when a person becomes enlightened, the biological conditioning continues no different from before. That is very clear. In the case of what you call the input, or you called it the programming.
No, let me put it. What is the input? I probably didn't make it clear. The input is a thought comes. Generally the man says, I had a thought. But what has happened is, you don't have any control, nor does any sage at any time did he have any control over the thought that comes next. The thought that comes next comes from the pool of consciousness. Or God sends it, you can say in simpler terms. That is the input. The next thought that comes over which you have no control is the input. Or, similarly, what is seen next, or what is heard next, or smelt next, or tasted next, or touched next, any of the senses. Which of the senses will next react to which object? No one has any control. That is the input. That is the input. A thought, something seen, heard, over which you have no control is the input. And the reaction is also something over which you have no control, because that is according to the conditioning, programming. And the programming, I mean, is this. Nobody had any choice over the parents to whom he or she would be born. Therefore, no one had the control over the genes or the unique DNA in every human body. By the same token, no one had the control to be born to particular parents in a particular environment, in which environment that human object received its conditioning from day one. Conditioning at home, conditioning in school, conditioning in society, conditioning in church or temple. Continuous and what is the conditioning? This is right, that is wrong. This is fair, that is unfair. This is good, that is bad. You should do this, you shouldn't do that. Basically, that is the condition on which is based your judgment at any particular point, and the decision you make about any particular problem that arises.
So could we say that externally we can't see a difference between the sage and the unenlightened person?
That is correct.
Sorry, yes. Yeah.
That is correct.
None at all?
None at all. That is why I keep on repeating it is a concept, because it is a concept. That is my concept. My concept is that the immediate arising as an output for an input that is over which I have no control, the reaction is because of the programming, genes or DNA plus environmental condition, over which also I have no control. And that is the same for a sage or anyone. It's a body-mind organism, a mechanical piece.
Okay, so in the case of the biological conditioning and that, I can see that that couldn't change.
Yes.
In the case of the psychological input or conditioning, which you would equate with the thinking mind,
Yes.
am I correct? I could see, for example, a person feels pain and they groan.
Yes.
But in the case of, say, somebody who was a kleptomaniac,
Yes.
there seems to be an element of choice there,
Yes.
and therefore I would assume that there may be some difference between the enlightened person's behavior and the unenlightened person's behavior.
Which difference comes in as a reaction to the biological reaction.
Again?
That is exactly the difference I'm saying between a sage and an ordinary person. But that difference is located in the reaction of the ordinary man, the biological reaction. In the case of a sage, because the ego with a sense of personal doership is not there is no subsequent reaction of the ego to the biological reaction.
So there is some difference in the behavior. Or
Yes.
there may be some difference.
Oh yes, indeed, indeed. But not in the natural biological.
Okay, yes.
That is what I'm saying, you see.
Yes,
The mind which reacts is the thinking mind which is absent in the case of a sage. It is indeed the thinking mind which does the reaction to the natural biological reaction. It is indeed the thinking mind which is the ego which reacts to the natural reaction, which is exactly what is absent in the case of a sage. The thinking mind with a sense of personal doership. I am the thinker, I am the doer, I am the experiencer, I am the seeker. That is the thinking mind and the ego with a sense of personal doership. That being absent in the case of a sage, the reaction to the natural reaction doesn't happen. In the case of an ordinary man, the ego reacts to the original reaction and continues to react.
And we can assume that you are making this distinction between these two for purposes of clarity, not that there are two quite separate minds, or they're just different functions of the same mind?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Sure. That is why I say, conceptually, I divide the mind with its two aspects. The working mind, which continues in the sage even after self-realization, and the thinking mind, which is the ego, more or less living in future, and worrying and planning about its future, which is the ego with a sense of personal doership. Therefore what I say is, the me, the thinking mind, the ego with the sense of personal doership are different names for the same thing. They are synonyms for the same thing. Ego with a sense of personal doership. The me, in the case of a sage, the sage is not worried about using the word me, mine. You see, why? Because there is a total understanding that the me and my words have to be used in order to communicate. But as far as he is concerned, he knows. You see, that the me and my refers only to the body-mind organism.
What about this? Yesterday you were talking about
Doership, and you're also talking about the source, what you have called the source.
Yeah.
Now, when you're talking about the doership and absence of this, I could understand how you can speak from personal experience. If that has happened, one would know.
Yeah.
But then you've talked about the function and what have you of the source. How do you know that? Is this from Sruti, or is it from experience, or
That is a concept. The concept being that the basic concept is that there is some reality. There is some reality. Everything that we see, perceive with the senses is unreal. So before the manifestation occurs, there has to be, that is the basic concept, there has to be what I call the source. Now, whether you call the source emptiness, whether you call it nothingness, or whether you call it noumenon, or whether you call it primal energy, or you call it consciousness, is immaterial. Because there has to be a source from which this visible manifestation has emerged.
So you have introduced this concept to make, to explain things or to make it clearer? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Therefore, it is a concept. It is a concept.
I'm happy to hear that.
That is why, Swami, you must have heard me a dozen times. This is a concept. This is my concept. And I made it clear, according to my concept. Anything any sage has ever said at any time is a concept. Anything any scripture of any religion has said at any time is a concept. The truth, the concept being something which some may accept, some may deny. But the truth is only that which no one can deny, because it is not liable to interpretation.
In other words, it's a direct experience? Or?
Yes.
So when you're talking about, say, doership, you're speaking from direct experience. When you're
correct.
talking about source, you're speaking purely conceptually.
That is correct.
That's wonderful. I like that.
That is indeed correct. And I'm so anxious that this should not be misunderstood, that I keep repeating. Everything anybody has said is a concept. So someone may say, even Lord Krishna? I said, of course. You see? So the only truth is the impersonal awareness of being. The impersonal awareness of being, existing. I am. I am is the only truth, which no one can deny.
Well, in other words, you know, you're scheduling events for 6 months, etc.
So, can we not bring it down and focus the question? How is it possible to live one's life without precise military-like planning?
Right.
To live an efficient life?
That's right.
That's the question, isn't it? So, that planning which is done is by the working mind. The working mind does the planning. The thinking mind says, hey, you've got a plan. How do you know it's going to work? That is the thinking mind. The working mind plans. And the thinking mind casts doubts about what may happen in the future. You see, the working mind and thinking mind. Are you an American?
No, unfortunately.
Australian, you say? Now, in the States, you probably remember Mutt and Jeff. Mutt and Jeff, you know. Now, I think it's stopped now. Mutt was the short fellow, Jeff was the tall. No, wait a minute, the other way around.
Yeah.
Jeff is the short chap, Mutt is the tall one. So, they are going in a car up the hill. You see? Mutt, the driver, he's driving, you know, and body language coaxes the car to go up, you see, on the hill. So finally, when he reaches the top, Mutt, big relief, sigh of relief. If it hadn't reached the top, we would have slid right back to the bottom. You see? And Jeff says, no, Mutt, we wouldn't have, because I had the handbrake on full. You see? So the foot on the accelerator is the thinking, is the working mind. Pulling the brake is the thinking mind, which stops the working mind from working efficiently. You see? So the thinking mind is always the handbrake. The physicist and the Buddhist monk make a great combination. Yes, Swamiji. And this is your last day, I am told, is it? Nice. So, have you got your list of comments? Let's go through them.
You have used three terms: consciousness,
Yes.
and the mind, in the sense of, say, working mind and
Thinking mind, yes.
And also, particularly intrigues me, impersonal awareness of being.
Yes.
Could you talk about the distinctions,
Very.
if any, between them?
What I said was the impersonal awareness of being.
What did I do? Yeah, sorry, impersonal
Yes,
awareness
not
of
personal
being.
awareness.
Sorry, yes. Could you talk about the distinctions, if any, between these three?
Between these three, but consciousness is all there is. Consciousness is the only reality.
Yeah, but not in the, say, in the sense of Berkeleyan
No,
philosophy.
consciousness is the only reality in whichever sense. So, what exists? In fact, yesterday I read the English scientist, Indian scientist community. They say they are going to create conditions half a second after the Big Bang. You see? And what struck me then was, would they be able to create conditions half a second before the Big Bang? So, consciousness at rest is what is, or what was, conceptually of course, before the half a second before the Big Bang. Half a second after the Big Bang, consciousness at rest became consciousness in movement.
So when I think of
Our
consciousness...
potential energy activates itself.
I know this is a difficult term, but when I think of consciousness, say in the Western sense, like say William James, consciousness is to be conscious, that is to see, hear, taste, touch and smell. You do not mean it in this sense?
Yes, to be conscious. To be what, Swamiji? Consciousness, you are trying to describe consciousness by saying to be conscious. So, to be what?
Well, I'm conscious of you, I'm conscious of seeing, I'm conscious of feeling.
No, there...
Or there is consciousness of.
In other words, if there were no consciousness, you wouldn't be able to see me or know me, I wouldn't be able to see you or know me. Therefore, the primal base is consciousness. Consciousness is the only reality. Consciousness at rest is potential energy. After the Big Bang, but the interpretation, the potential energy has activated itself. And the potential energy, in order to be potential, has to activate itself sometime. Otherwise, potential energy would be dead matter. So, that is why I say, it is the nature of reality to create the manifestation. It is the nature of the potential to activate itself sometimes. It is the nature of the potential to activate itself. Otherwise, potential would be nothing. It would be dead matter. And it is consciousness at rest, which the other concept is potential energy. Consciousness in movement is half a second after the Big Bang.
Okay. Mind?
But wait a minute. But the important thing so far, Swamiji, is consciousness at rest and consciousness in movement, where there is awareness of itself. That is when there is an impersonal awareness of being. Consciousness at rest, when there is no awareness of being. And consciousness in movement, when there is this awareness of being, is the same consciousness. They are not two.
Give it to me again. Sorry.
Consciousness at rest is the same consciousness which is in movement. Swamiji who is sitting down is the same Swamiji when he stands up. or lies down, or runs, or walks. So, consciousness is the only reality in whatever aspect. Consciousness at rest is what is before the Big Bang. Consciousness in movement is after the Big Bang. And it is only after the movement begins that there is awareness of being. Otherwise, there is no necessity of any awareness of being.
So, when there is this awareness of being, what is the being?
Being is potential energy, which can only exhibit when it is in activization. Therefore, potential energy or consciousness before the Big Bang is something no one can know, because that is all there is. How can anyone know subjectivity as such? Pure subjectivity. How can anyone know that? In fact, the pure subjectivity doesn't even have to know itself. And the potential energy, only when it activizes, is aware of the energy. Consciousness only in movement is aware, I am. You see? That is consciousness. Consciousness in action through an individual body-mind organism, through a sentient being, is mind. You see? Consciousness in action through a particular body-mind organism, through any of its senses, seeing, hearing, touching, is consciousness in action. If there were no consciousness, the senses wouldn't work. So for the senses to work, the aspect of consciousness conceptually is called sentience. So we say there is a sentient object and an insentient object. So in the consciousness functions, consciousness in action is the sentience in a sentient being. You see? And the sentience in a sentient being is the mind. The totality of the mind, which I conceptually divide into the working mind and the thinking mind. That is the framework, that is the conceptual framework which is a pointer to the truth. So as far as the human being is concerned, which is a sentient being in action, its thinking, the mind, can only go back to its source, which is consciousness in action. Consciousness in action means the awareness of being. And that awareness of being is of the consciousness. So through whichever body-mind organism, consciousness becomes aware of itself, is the impersonal consciousness. But when the consciousness identifies itself with a particular body, with a sense of personal doership, the impersonal awareness becomes personal awareness. And that's where the trouble starts. So the real self-realization is to be able to go from the personal awareness to impersonal awareness. The personal awareness sees or hears, judges, and acts. So when this sense of personal doership is gone, then what remains is really the impersonal awareness. With a working mind, which enables that body-mind organism could function for the rest of its span of life.
So the spiritual practice that you were talking about, is that one
Yes.
you said that you is to in some way enhance the possibilities that impersonal awareness of being will occur more frequently.
So, yes, that is the practice. That is what happens during the practice. The personal awareness, the ego, with a sense of personal doership, which frequently clouds the impersonal awareness. The true peace, the personal awareness, the identity, the ego with a sense of personal doership is what interferes with the natural peace. Impersonal awareness means peace. And what normally happens is the personal awareness, which functions most of the time, doesn't allow the basic piece of impersonal awareness to be. So as the understanding goes deeper, through this practice of self-investigation, the happening of the personal awareness interrupting the peace of the impersonal awareness becomes less and less and less. The interference becomes less and less, and the happening of the peace, the impersonal awareness, becomes more and more.
Now we have a practice that is
The Buddhist.
There's a practice.
Yes.
And you have a practice which I will call reviewing. That is, at the end of the day, you are thinking back.
Yes, investigation. Now,
investigation.
just a minute. I say at the end of the day, to begin.
Oh, I see.
You see? But if you're in the happy position of being able to take a few minutes off your normal work and do the investigation, nothing prevents it. In fact, that is what happens. As the practice becomes deeper, invariably, the working mind tries to find gaps during the working day when this investigation can happen. So that at the end of, you begin with the end of the day, then at a certain time, next day, immediately the next day, or the 2 days later, 3 days later, you see it happening that in the middle of the day, between two bouts of work, there is a sudden realization that what I thought I was doing was just happening. A flash of the result of the investigation without the investigation. A flash of the result of the investigation without the necessity of the investigation. That is why it's a flash.
Now this is very similar, it seems to me, to what we call vipassana, but there the emphasis is not so much on seeing the impersonality of doership, but as seeing the impersonality of the discrete experiences.
I'm sorry, please say that again, Swamiji.
So in our practice,
Yes, of vipassana.
it
Yes.
seems to be very similar.
I see.
But the emphasis is not so much on seeing the impersonality of doership,
Yes.
but on seeing the impersonality of the discrete experiences. So one becomes aware or mindful just of the fact of seeing, just of the fact of having a feeling or something like that. So what do you think of that?
You see, what happens is, then this practice could continue. You see, the basis is this. Ultimately, as someone asked yesterday, who does the practice? Who wants self-realization? Who wants enlightenment? The ego.
So you're saying
So what
to
I'm
let it happen rather than to try to do it.
No, let the ego investigate. Let the ego investigate from his or her own personal experience in order to come to the conclusion that the ego says, I have done the investigation, no one else. I myself have investigated number of actions which I thought were my actions. And each time I've come to the conclusion that it was a happening, not my doing. So it is the ego which comes to the conclusion from personal experience that it doesn't exist. As a doer, it doesn't exist.
That is very clear to me. What I'm now asking is,
Yes.
that's in the case of doing. What about in the case of just experiencing?
Yes.
Which seems to be the emphasis in the Buddhist practice.
Yes.
That is, just seeing experience as a discrete reality that arises and passes away.
Yes. So, in that case, who is looking for what?
So you would get beyond looking at the experience to who is looking at the experience.
Yes. And perhaps because this aspect is lacking, that people have confessed to me that he or she has been doing vipassana meditation for 20 years, 30 years. And the question has come up, when am I going to get what I'm supposed to get?
Yes, it is a problem.
Isn't that your
No, I agree.
20 years, 30 years? When am I going to get what I'm supposed to get? You see, here for the ego, the aim is limited. The aim is limited to only finding out whether he or she is the doer of actions which he or she thought she was. And come to the conclusion that I have investigated, I personally have investigated, not a concept from somebody. And I have come to the conclusion from personal experience that none of the actions which I have so far investigated, quite a few, not a single one, could I truly and honestly accept as my action. Therefore, the ego asks, then who is this me that I am so concerned about? Is there a me at all? And this, the ego, finds an extremely painful process. In some cases not at all. So in those cases where the resistance is programmed to be at a high level, this intense misery, that's why I say it becomes the dark night of the soul.
Well, you'd be interested to know maybe that in the Buddhist analysis it says that before the experience of enlightenment there's an experience called nibbida, which means the horrors.
That's it.
The horrors.
That's it. Well, you call it horror, I call it the dark night of the soul. Because that expression has been familiar to me. Although in entirely different context, of course. But that is it. That is horror. So only when the investigation reaches that stage of horror, of impossibility, and the ego is almost ready to commit suicide, then the question doesn't have the quality of an intellectual question. Because of this horror, the question assumes absolute, utter pain. And therefore, the question is asked not by the ego intellectually, but the pain, horror is felt. So, there is bound to be separation in the world of duality, so long as the body-mind organism is alive and functions in duality. When the functioning is in duality, separation must exist. But separation to what extent? Separation that I am one object, there are millions of other objects, but all are objects through which consciousness or the source or energy or God functions. All are instruments through which God functions. Where is the separation? No separation. So separation exists only in duality. It has to exist because it is duality. But the final understanding makes it clear that only life or the functioning of manifestation is in duality. What really exists prior to the duality, half a second prior to the Big Bang, is unicity. Consciousness, all there is. So that one work functioning in duality, living in duality, continues to function in duality with the total acceptance that there is duality only so long as this body-mind organism is there. You see? And sometimes when there is a certain amount of age and the body is rather tired, then the sage is never afraid of death. Why is the sage never afraid of death at any moment? Because he has never been afraid of life. Why is the sage never afraid of death? Because he has never been afraid of life. He has been participating in life, having the pleasure and the pain and the hurt, but knowing that it is no one doing it to me. So, he has been participating in life without pride, without guilt, without hatred, without envy or jealousy. So, he has been living in duality because the body-mind organism is a part of the duality. But with the full understanding that he, if he is nothing but unicity, or more accurately, all there is unicity. All there is consciousness. All this is just a play in duality. All there is the source of God. And whatever is told that he or she is God really doesn't exist. It's a fiction created by the divine hypnosis.
So it's the spiritual ego who wants to be like this and wants to share this. No?
Yes, and that has been beautifully put. The same has been beautifully put by the Buddha. Samsara is dukkha. But he wanted to pinpoint the dukkha. Therefore, he didn't say samsara is 5% sukha, 95% dukkha. He said samsara is dukkha and nirvana is peace. But he added, they are not two. That is, it is not that life, which is dukkha, is Bombay, and nirvana, which is peace, is Paris. Then it would be simple. If you had the money, you got into a plane, left Bombay and went to Paris. But he said no. Samsara is dukkha, nirvana is peace, but they are not two. In other words, what he said was, you have to find your nirvana, peace, while living in samsara. You see, you have to find your peace, nirvana, while living in samsara. And that happens only when this self-investigation. Who is unhappy? I am unhappy. That is the me, the ego. The ego, I am unhappy. Then the ego is told that why are you unhappy? Because something good happens, I am proud. Something bad happens, I feel guilty. And I am told I am committing sin. So I am unhappy basically because of the enormous, awesome load of sin and guilt. And add to it hatred. You see? So, how does the nirvana, peace of nirvana happen? While you're living in this samsara of dukkha. If you are able to get rid of the awesome burden of sin and guilt and pride and hatred, then you have the peace of nirvana while being in samsara. While being in samsara, which you cannot escape, you still suffer the pains and pleasures of life. Pains and pleasures of life happen. But understanding basically that they are just happenings, and you don't get involved in the pains and pleasures through pride and guilt and hatred. I repeat, pains and pleasures and hurts happen as part of life. When you are able to accept the pain, pleasure and hurt of life as part of life, without getting involved in pride and guilt and hatred, then the pains and pleasures are taken as something which happens and then goes. They are, as described in several places, they are like waves on the ocean. There is a gust of wind, there is a wave. There is a storm, the waves are higher. And whether the gust of wind happens or the storm happens is not in my control. So whether the wave happens or the huge wave, tidal wave happens, is accepted as something over which I have no control. So these pleasures and pains in life continue, and when there is no involvement of the ego results in pride if an action is accepted by society, sin and guilt if the society says it's a bad action, and hatred for someone if I consider someone has hurt me, but the hatred doesn't arise if I accept that the hurt happened to me not because someone can hurt me, but because it was the destiny of this body-mind only, according to the will of God, to be hurt. So the hurt is also accepted.
Thank you very much, sir. You gave me something not to think about.
I'm sorry, it was not the intention.